this on the ceiling and then pounce through a little bag of charcoal and make little marks all the way along, leaving the outline, take the paper away and then join up the dots. Just a tiny bit more there. Taste it, can you?
Like Michelangelo, Leo and Fleur must choose their pigments carefully. If they get it wrong, it could spell disaster.
I've sent some money to my father to buy an ounce of azurite. I told him to buy the best there is. If you can't get the best, don't bother.
Michelangelo demanded the finest quality and value for money. Some earth pigments, like terra verde and raw umber, were very cheap because they were dug up in Italy. But others, like ultramarine blue, were as expensive as gold. It was imported from faraway Afghanistan.
The essence of fresco painting is very, very simple. Just the raw powdered pigment, a bit of water, and unlike oil painting where the oil holds the pigment together, and this, it's a surface you paint on, the plaster itself that becomes the binder.
I've marked out the gennate, which is the work that I can do in a day.
And into that, you're going to do your magic on your side, and I'll do mine on mine. And the last one to finish is a sissy.
I'll accept being a sissy. I'm a perfectionist.
Fresco painting is a race against the clock. The hot weather means the artists have just a few hours before the plaster becomes too dry to paint. They must work at speed and get everything right first time, every time. But it's difficult to get a sense of perspective working so close to the ceiling, as Leo discovers.
This just doesn't look like anything. It just looks like a great big pink blancmange.
Despite working night and day, Michelangelo struggled to meet the challenge. In the winter of 1508, his lack of experience started to show as he worked on his first scene, the flood. Mildew began appearing all over the painting. Michelangelo's worst fears were realized. He had applied the plaster too wet. He had to destroy his work and start all over again. This was a huge setback. But if that wasn't bad enough, Michelangelo had to endure regular delays. Every time the chapel was needed for a mass, he had to down his brushes and wait silently. At St. Joseph's, Leo and Fleur are facing the same frustrations. After just 3 days, painting the ceiling is taking its toll on Leo.
Well, everything was going well with this ceiling. And then came Saturday night. And Saturday night, I just couldn't sleep because of the pain. And I thought, I've had enough of this. I found myself in hospital and I've done something to a muscle at the back of the neck. No pain, no gain.
Painting the ceiling was hell for Michelangelo. It inspired him to write a poem, possibly one of the greatest odes to agony ever written.
I've already ruptured myself from all this strain. Just like it pisses down on cats in Lombardy. My beard points towards heaven. I feel the back of my brain upon my neck. My chest is like a harpy's. My hips have entered my belly, making a counterweight of my arse. And without my eyes, I move in vain.
If you show me how you're working for most of the day.
Well, most of it is stretching up like that. I mean, not absolutely at full-length arm, but sort of like that sort of height.
The pain is too much for Leo. Osteopath Karen Eastwood has been called in.
Okay, so you're doing this for how many hours a day?
Varies between about 8 and about 13 we've been doing.
And how long did Michelangelo do it for?
4 years.
And this is for you after a week.
Yeah, what a wimp, what a wimp.
So, if you imagine you're in this position all day, there are lots of blood vessels and nerves supplying to the back of the head.
Yeah.
So you're compressing all those structures, so you would expect to have headaches possibly by the end of the day.
Yeah, yeah.
Tightness through the shoulders.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're working through here. With Michelangelo, he probably would have ended up with structural changes to his neck, maybe even more bony formation.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, his body changed as he's doing it?
Yeah, after 4 years.
Extraordinary.
As if the pain was not enough, Michelangelo also had to contend with the impatience of Julius II.
The Pope demanded that I dismantle the scaffolding so that he could see the work. I was furious. He was so keen that he arrived before even the dust had settled. The ceiling was only half finished, but the Pope stood in awe.
The Pope may have been impressed, but Michelangelo, after 2 years' hard labor, was in fact shocked by what he saw. When he looked up from 20 meters below, he found that the figures in the flood were too small to see. Working so close to the ceiling, he had misjudged the scale. Michelangelo now feared that his old adversary Bramante would use this mistake to persuade the Pope to replace him with his protégé Raphael.
Bramante, always Bramante, tried to persuade the Pope to let him take over. But I finally persuaded the Pope of Bramante's deficiencies as an architect, and Raphael never got near the ceiling.
When Michelangelo began work on the second half of the ceiling, he was determined not to make the same mistake again. He was about to show his true genius as a painter.
That's one of the things about Michelangelo, is his foreshortening and his use of his perspective tricks to move things through space and make them believable. I quite like the way he's done that arm, actually. It really is convincingly foreshortened. The way he's done it and sort of darkened off the bicep and not painted the forearm, it's quite a neat trick. Of course, he's painting like a sculptor, and he was.
See you in the morning. I can hear the whispers drifting up from down there. I can hear them saying, oh, he's just a simple sculptor. He's not capable of foreshortening. Not like the great Raphael. His fancy clothes and his fancy women. We just look up there. Look at God creating the grass and the plants. Wherever you go, He follows you. From down there, it'll look like magic.
Everything was going well with the painting, but there was yet another delay. This time, it was a row about money.
He went to get his money, but the Pope was no longer there. The Pope was in Bologna fighting the war. What does he do? He goes to Bologna to ask the Pope for the money that is due to him. Having succeeded, apparently, in telling the Pope that he needed his money, he went back to Rome. The money did not arrive. He went to Bologna a second time before the money finally arrived.
After 8 months, the Pope returned from the war. The first thing he wanted to see was his ceiling, but Michelangelo wouldn't let him anywhere near it.
The Pope just tried to climb up here. So I blocked him by sitting on this ladder. The other day I ended up throwing planks at him. He shouted up at me, "When are you going to finish that ceiling? You've been up there for months. What are you playing at?" So I replied, quite reasonably in my opinion, "I'll finish that ceiling when I can." When I can.
By 1511,